The Indian pharma industry has been consistent in its growth trajectory. Similarly, India's chemical industry is the 6th largest in the world and the 3rd largest in Asia. Given the sensitive impact that pharmaceuticals as well as the chemical sector has on the lives of people, it is not a surprise that they are one of the most regulated sectors in the Indian economy. In our panel discussions, our distinguished panelists will shed a light on the compliance challenges faced in these industries and integrating a healthy corporate governance. I am pleased to introduce our panel on pharmaceutical and chemicals, role of compliance and governance. Our panel will be moderated by our Director and CEO, Mr. Jaideep Kewalramani. Mr. Kewalramani has over 24 years of experience in leading and developing businesses across technology, outsourcing, digital, and AI. He has managed multi-million-dollar businesses portfolio, delivered impactful results, and several Fortune 500 clients. He has worked for organizations such as Thomson Reuters, Zensar Technologies across US, UK, and India. Mr. Kewalramani is an executive program graduate from Stanford University, an MBA in International Studies from Somaya University. His MBA school has recognized him as the most distinguished alumni in 2018. Mr. Kewalramani also holds several patents in artificial intelligence domain and has been recognized as ecosystem member by India AI. He regularly speaks on platforms like NASSCOM, ICSI, and CII. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce our panelists for this session. Ms. Monaz Noble, CFO of Novartis Healthcare Limited. Ms. Noble joined Novartis in 2010 and is currently the CFO of Novartis. In her career spanning over 2 decades, she has worked with Cadbury India Limited, Godrej Soaps Limited. She is also an associate member of the Institute of Company Secretaries in India, an associate cost accountant and management accountant. Joining us today, we also have with us Ms. Padmini Khare Kaicker, Managing Partner at 𝗕𝗚 Khare & Co. Ms. Kaicker comes with 2.5 decades of varied experience servicing large and mid-sized clients in various industries. She also sits on the boards of various reputed companies such as Tata Chemicals, Kotak Mahindra Investment Limited, to name some. She is also a member of the Shield panel for technical review of annual accounts for 𝗖𝗇 Awards for Excellence in Finance Reporting and has served on the committees of Institute of the Chartered Accountant of India. Joining us today, we also have with us Mr. Mukund Thakkar, Senior Vice President, Legal, Zydus Group. He started his career with Pharmaceuticals Limited in 1993. Mr. Thakkar has worked with many reputed companies and leading law firms. He has a rich corporate advisory and secretarial experience of over 28 years across multiple industries. Presently, he is the Senior Vice President, Legal of the Zydus Group, which is a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical company in wellness and pharmaceutical, leading a team of over 15 lawyers who are under him. We also have with us Mr. Rajiv Chandan, General Counsel and Company Secretary for Tata Chemicals Limited. Mr. Chandan is a corporate lawyer and company secretary by profession. He is with the Tata Group since 2007 and is a key managerial person in the Tata Chemicals Limited, as well as designated as the General Counsel and Company Secretary. Mr. Chandan has over 3 decades of experience across diverse industries and sectors. Now, I hand it over to you, Mr. Kewalramani.
Thank you so much for joining us, and Ashni, thanks for the warm introductions. Let's start with our panel discussion. Welcome to all the panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today. As we know, in the last 18 months, things have been extremely crazy for the pharmaceutical and the chemicals industry. It seems like this is the hottest sector right now. To state a few statistics, the Indian pharmaceutical industry is now the world's third largest by volume, probably fast approaching the second position, and 14th largest in terms of value. Last financial year, we crossed the 3 lakh crore mark for the entire pharma industry, 50% of that which was exported out of the country. The Quad countries, which was recently kind of announced as an alliance, have pledged to donate more than 1.2 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses. And this is in addition to the vaccines financed through COVAX. Incredible times ahead for us. In parallel, the chemical industry is also a solid, critical, integral part of our growing Indian economy. Of course, chemical acts as a feeder to pharma, but also plays its own independent role in other industries. It is projected that in the next 3 years, the chemical industry in the country will cross $300 billion. We are growing at a rate of 1.2 to 1.5 times of the gross domestic produce, and 30% of our current chemical requirements are met by imports. Now, that's a huge, staggering number. Clearly, there's an opportunity to create our own growth story over here and look at import substitutes. The third thing that has been going on is, of course, 2020, because of COVID, saw a huge drop in the M&A activity. But as they say, the revenge spend is happening. The M&A activity in this space is also set to cross $1.5 trillion as deployable capital will be available. With that, I'd like to open with comments from Rajiv, and maybe he could talk about what the last 18 months have been like, and then we'll move on to other panelists. Rajiv.
Yeah. So yes, in fact, the COVID itself has, actually brought in a lot of stress as well as opportunities for the sector. As a chemical company, we have gone through various stress, as well as we have seen how the COVID has brought in a growth for pharma as well as active pharma ingredient companies because of health and wellness priorities which people have started looking at now. In addition to that, if you see as a country, I think as we all know that we are a large country with huge populations, and the chemical and pharma which impact each and every individual in some or other way. So domestic demand recovery we have seen quickly, in this period, and also import substitution is also playing a very big role in growth, which we are now talking about in these sectors. Plus, I think the China plus one strategy, which everyone is talking about, is also playing out slowly in the economy, which we can see. This is also aided with the 2-3 other points like stable government environment, which we have seen in last couple 6-7 years, and also proactive engagements of the government with the industry is also aiding to this growth, as well as the confidence which we have now see after going through a difficult period for last 18 months. Plus, we also have seen government taking proactive steps to bring in a lot of favorable policies towards the industry, like PLI schemes and Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is helping the industry to cope up with the stretch which they have faced. Also, speeding up the industrialization, and manufacturing sector is getting benefited out of this. Over and above this, we have seen the easy liquidity, which is we have seen in the economy in last a year or so. We can see that with the dozens of chemicals, specialty chemical companies and pharma companies coming to the capital market and raising huge capitals without any difficulty, without any hassles. So all these things, I think, are helping the country to overcome the difficult period which we have faced. And I see that the chemical sector, particularly, as you rightly said, is going to grow 1.3 to 1.5 times of GDP growth rate. And this is because we could see that healthy rebound of end user industries are visibly seen in the economy. those textile constructions and auto sectors are experiencing the extended recovery cycle, whereas we have seen the pharma, agrochemicals, and personal care sectors that are already witnessed huge surge. So this is what I feel. I think it's a pandemic, and also pandemic was difficult. Also opportunities we can see through by with streamlining and efficiency has been brought into the industries as we work.
Rajiv, thank you so much. At this point, let me invite Monaz for her opening comments. Monaz.
Yeah, no, sure. And thanks, Rajiv. I think you really summed up the environment and the industry and how the both pharma as well as chemical is coping there. And definitely, I think with challenges comes opportunities, and definitely there was a silver lining. So, Jaideep, if I could say from an organization perspective, I think there was a kind of a tectonic shift. And what I have seen is primarily in the 4 areas, right? And I think we'll never be the same when we kind of come back altogether. So 4 trends that we've seen, specifically, I'm talking about the pharmaceutical industry, and the first and foremost, and it's like very well documented, and probably there are many, many articles around it, is this whole acceleration around digitization, data science, and artificial intelligence. It somehow has permeated through the organization, through most of the companies as well, and that's supposed to also change the behavioral both ways, right? For our associates, employees, associates, stakeholders, as well as for our customers, including the HCPs. So I think that's the big pillar in that sense, right? So that's one. The second thing is also around with the entire speed and the acceleration of digitization. We've also seen companies looking at cleaning up the entire digital core, right? So making your people, processes, as well as data clean, because most of your digitalization as well as your advancement in terms of AI, data science will actually build on that platform. So I think that's the second piece. The third piece is that given the challenges and the investments done by the organizations, as a regard and a focus on productivity as well. So that's the third pillar. And finally is the fourth and the most important one is redesigning workforce and the ways of working. And there one more thing I could say is that there is absolutely a different way of working, with a special emphasis on empathy. So I think these 4 for me have been, differences that I've seen from, at least from where I started working to where, now we are seeing these for the last year and a half. So I guess, Jaideep, I would stop there and then open for other, points from the other panelists.
Thank you, Monaz. We'll certainly build up the conversation around the digital transformation, including AI, but you touched upon empathy. We will definitely pick that up later during the conversation. Let me now shift gears and request Mukund to share his opening comments, please.
Well, thanks, Rajiv and Monaz, to set up the context. For me, being in pharma company at the forefront of delivering the medicine for cure was an experience that was unparalleled in any of my previous organizations. Whatever, I believe this government did a good job when it came to handling the entire COVID situation and the way distribution of medicine was done. But I think it was on the basis of the confidence that the pharma industry gave to the government when it started. I remember when the first wave came, when everything stopped working in March, April and all that, we were immediately in talks with Gilead for remdesivir. And at the speed at which we started on that project, immediately, started manufacturing that. And then in between, there was the entire testing kit being imported. There was a total chaos, but I believe that all the pharma companies, and I can speak for myself, and that is Zydus, we were working round the clock on everything. And obviously, challenges were too many. Not just that, you have to come up with something that cures or at least provides some relief to COVID patients and all of that. But the administrative challenges, like in some of our plants, the employees could not even reach the plants. And, we were part of the essential services that we had to continuously, for at least first 2 months, we were to deal with all the law enforcing agencies to ensure that at least our workers reach the factory. And some of these workers were, staying not exactly near the factory, maybe 5 kilometers away from the factory, and it would change the district. And at that even district level, movement of employees from their home to factory had got impacted. And, we had only, less than half strength. How would we face the challenges of ramping up the production and doing everything? So I'm talking about from April till this second wave. So almost for like 12, 14 months, the entire HCQ story happened, where suddenly there was a huge demand for HCQ. There was a huge demand for remdesivir. In November, December, the production had gone down because things were, easy. Suddenly from February onwards, February 2021, again, there was a huge second wave where Remdec was like absolutely not available. And, various PILs filed in various high courts. All the state drug authorities were monitoring the dispatch. The high courts were monitoring dispatch. We were submitting reports every day to high court. In 2-3 places, we had the cases going on against all the pharma companies which are making this. So I believe that it was a testing times for all of us, and we stood firm. Pharma industry has really, and now innovation, research and development is a key, because if we were to stop the third wave, or if we were to continue ramp up our vaccine, now Zydus will be launching vaccine very soon. It's a huge task ahead, but I believe that it's a good opportunity for pharma companies. And I believe that the government understands this and works very, very closely with all the pharma companies to ensure that, the vaccine is reached to the, everybody in India, and as well as all the important life-saving drugs. So I believe it's a very interesting times for all of us.
Thank you, Mukund. And I think not just India, I think being a part of the Quad, we've kind of pledged it for the world as well. So let's see how that pans out. But let me now invite Padmini to share her opening comments, please.
Yeah, sure. So I think we did mention about the spectacular growth in the pharma industry and the export achievements of the pharma industry, and the fact that in chemicals we are quite largely dependent on China, and almost 30% of our chemicals are imported. So I feel there is an opportunity here to kind of maybe prioritize the drugs that we would like to have indigenous chemical manufacture of, and incentivize, because these are capital intensive investments, so incentivize manufacture of those chemicals in India. And because right now China, for various reasons, including COVID, is in the position that it is, and therefore I think this is an opportunity to exploit for this purpose. And the other thing is that struck me is that there is a lot of focus on ESG around the world, and we have been talking about electric cars, etc. But lithium batteries being produced in India is still something which is work in progress, which we can kind of hasten, perhaps. Yeah, I think these were the two main points that I had wanted to make. Yeah.
Thank you, Padmini. I think you and Rajiv touched upon the China plus one. Let's put a pin on that one. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. But Monaz, you spoke about the innovation or the acceleration of innovation that has happened in the last 18 months. And you painted a fairly elaborate picture of revamping people, process technologies, talking about AI. But can you talk about specific areas where the industry in large was able to innovate and help meet growth or the demand of the kind of consumers, businesses. Do you have some specific examples that you can think of and share with the audience?
Yeah, I guess to start off with, if we went to the global example, right? And I think Mukund also did, touch upon it, like how the India pharma companies also kind of, went all out to meet the demands and to kind of, talk about the drugs availability. But I guess a simple example, if I can take, is about the vaccine discovery, right? So when I mentioned about how AI and digital is kind of, contributing to hastening, right? So traditionally, on an average, the pharma sector for any new drug development, to be kind of placed right from developing it to hitting the market is around 8.5 years, right? But two novel vaccines were developed, tested, authorized in less than, if I could say, less than a year and a half. So I guess that's starting off from the entire discovery of vaccine itself, right? And in that, I think there were a lot of learnings, and there were a lot of learnings, I guess, for all countries and industry, pharma industry in that sense. Because the way of conducting trials to the way of filing, also I feel from the regulatory authorities as well, I think there has been a big shift in terms of acceptance, in terms of how we kind of dealing with the entire process. So I think these are a couple of things which are here to stay. So I guess a lot of investment and kind of studies are behind in terms of how do pharma industry collapse that time taken, right? And that's the longest term of investment, right? So how do you actually use data, digital, to simulate certain things which are lab controlled, and then kind of crush, reduce the time. So I guess that's one. The second thing, of course, is again in terms of the entire HCP engagement, to pharma symposiums, to how do we really interact, right? So earlier you would have a huge amount of, kind of conferences being held and things like that, where you would actually spend time, energy, money. Also, alluding to Padmini's point, you'd have carbon footprint because you've been like people flying all over, right? I think all those things are kind of, now in a way, maybe in a good way, in a positive direction, because I think those kind of things would actually now, having tested success to a certain extent, when we go back, of course there'll be a blend, it'll be more of an hybrid. So I think that's something again, which is pretty important. And the other thing is the whole clinical trial and the data, the way you could actually use that and to understand it furthermore, is something which is again a kind of support that comes through from the entire data science field. I guess the other thing also is many companies are now also working with tech-enabled companies to understand. So there's been a bit of a marriage globally, more so even in India we see that there are startups, of course, but there is also a marriage between tech companies where big pharma companies, Indian, global, are tying up and then leveraging those, right? So these are the things which were pretty unseen and unheard earlier on, but I think that's something which again, is where the industry is headed. So definitely on a cusp of some sort of changed model, both, as I mentioned, from an organization perspective as well as from associates perspective.
Right. Now, Monaz, thank you so much for elaborating on that point. Let's talk about China plus one. Rajiv, you spoke about that. How do you think, two perspectives over here. One is, how is the relationship between the pharma and the chemical industry with the government to help meet this opportunity of China plus one, where Western Europe and North America are actively looking at this strategy? So can you touch upon both of these?
In fact, I think government has already shown the indications that we should seize on this opportunity and let it not go waste. And I see the most of the policy announcements of the government, which is whether it's Atmanirbhar Bharat is once towards that we don't. In fact, even the world need not only depend on China. So India is another best option available for it's a good manufacturing place. where this is I see that it is industry as well as the government is working towards that, and the government policies are intended towards that, and industries are also working hand in hand with the government towards achieving that. This is an opportunity which everyone feels that we should not let go, and and capitalize on that.
And just to add, I think to Rajiv, I mean, since you're talking about prioritizing something, maybe, diabetes, heart, BP, we take some of the more prevalent diseases that afflict Asians and Indians and work back to the building blocks there and prioritize on China substitution for those could be one approach, I thought.
Yeah, certainly. So, Rajiv, thank you. Padmini and Mukund, what's been your take on how the government has partnered with these two industries to help accelerate the response to COVID and also capitalize on this opportunity and grow?
So I think from the start of the pandemic, government has been in talks with the pharma industry, and I believe even 2 days before the lockdown happened, PM had meetings with the pharma company chairmen and charted out a kind of a rough path as to how do we meet the challenges. And since then, there is a close, I won't say monitoring, but there is a close, what I can say, I won't even use the word integration, but collaboration kind of a thing where government has been constantly in touch with the pharma industries in terms of what are they developing, how are they developing, what kind of effects or what kind of, what I can say, the impact of those medicines will be on the cost for the, for the general public, as well as the effectiveness of that. And obviously, at every stage, we have supported the government in terms of the whatever plans that they had. We have pharma industries have backed it up with either ramping up the production or importing certain things which were otherwise not possible, or it would have taken time, and all of those things. And ICMR played a huge role in the entire what I can say, the management of COVID and pandemic. And I believe, then the vaccine story started, the way emergency approvals have been given. And so even for Zydus, Zydus was the only company which is, conducted almost 28,000 trials on 28,000 people. And, it was the last one to get an emergency approval because we did a lot of work towards that. And basically now that, kind of it will be ready, it will be for, about 12 years of age and all of that. So we have been constantly in touch with, in fact, as Prime Minister visited all these vaccine facilities of 3-4 vaccine manufacturers and himself looked at it, how it's going to be, how to make country corona free. I can't say corona free, but at least make people vaccinated so that, the third wave can be stopped. And I believe the vaccination so far has actually helped in, if not preventing, delaying the third wave.
True, quite true. Yeah, Padmini, please go ahead.
No, I thought that the PLI, Rajiv, correct me if I'm wrong, though announced for the chemical industry, it is yet to be implemented, right? The other couple of things, because we are emphasizing so much on solar, maybe, some incentives for the photovoltaic cells that go into the solar industry. Some are more anti-dumping for some of these Chinese product. And, also going to the extent of maybe banning some which are, largely manufactured in India. And maybe special PLI for the manufacture of chemicals which are environmentally friendly could be some. But I think an important part of regulatory framework in India, I mean, as a professional, I can say, though we talk a lot about, ease of doing business. Setting up a company is possible in a very short time today, but then from there onwards, I think all your views start, including you should know as a software compliance software person that the number of laws that are applicable to any company, I would say, I would defy anyone to be completely regulatory compliant. Yeah.
I mean, true that the regulatory environment continues to be in the VUCA space. And last year, we kind of did a quick statistical analysis. The number of notifications that one could receive across all the laws that can be tracked have doubled. But that's a subject for a different conversation and we'll take over the entire hour. But I want to touch upon two subjects before we lose all of you. One is, Padmini, you spoke about ESG. Let's talk about that. I mean, and I want to touch upon all three aspects. And so there is a concept of circular economy. There is a carbon offsetting that is being spoken about. There is sustainability. What's your take on the ESG aspect when it comes to chemicals? And later during the day, we've actually got a panel on alternate sources of energy led by 𝗕𝗏𝗃 𝗟𝗶𝗺𝗃 and represented by 3 top solar power companies, and on Atmanirbhar Bharat. So we're going to talk about those two subjects in great detail, but ESG particularly, how can we actually focus on that from the pharma and chemical space?
I think ESG is now an imperative and no longer a nice to have. And I think I read somewhere a big oil company wanting to become zero carbon footprint. But of course, the time period is like 30, 40 years from now. It's not that, you can do it tomorrow. And for which purpose, my institute has done one good thing is that they have released what is called a ESG maturity model. And it's a rating model, which is not a bad one to start with, which also helps you track your journey towards, conforming with the ESG requirements. And of course, in the chemical and pharmaceutical effluent treatment, environment, health and safety, and bio, etc., are some of the important ones to look out for. But this maturity model, I think, should be adopted, and every company should self-evaluate and then put into practice a action plan which can be tracked in this model. It's pretty good. I don't know why it's not being used so far. It was released in March 21 this year, and I would earnestly urge each one of you to have a look at it.
Thank you. What's your take on ESG?
Yeah, no, so I just wanted to, Padmini, supplement, as you mentioned, right? So similar to this, of course, globally, Novartis's ambition is by 2030 to be carbon neutral, and by 2050 to be, net zero contributor, right? So, but having said that, we also have for almost all the countries, including India, the score that you mentioned. And I must share one interesting thing which they did was, basically for individuals to actually also, get their carbon contribution score.
Okay.
And I thought I would, be the least because I don't use air conditioning, I don't use microwave. I'm one of those archaic dinosaur. But I was amazed. Of course, and primarily this was, just at the beginning of the pandemic because of my travel. So the amount of travel that I used to do, that was the one which was, I guess, a major contributor. It starts with your dietary habits to everything, right? But having said that, I think what is good is that there is an emphasis now in terms of, companies. And as Padmini, you mentioned, the more we get aware of the kind of, at the company level as well, I guess, it helps. A few starting points is we moved in terms of vendor selection. So again, vendors, so we have commitment even for the vendors that we use where, including, so no plastic, water neutrality, all of those kind of things. So I think what is measured can always be achieved is a very common finance philosophy. And I think here also we need to kind of, utilize that. But yeah, I think that was my bit from the ESG perspective. But definitely baby steps, I would say, but it's something that, we all need to be very cognizant about and consciously work towards.
Monaz, thank you. I think you spoke about individual contributions and corporate contributions both. I think that's very important. Rajiv, what's your take on the whole circular economy and the carbon offset?
Yeah, in fact, I will also touch upon a little bit on the ESG because that is also a very important topic which I really like to talk. See, ESG ratings are going to be a key metrics for the attracting investments in the company. So sustainable funds are going to use this ESG ratings as one of the metrics for selecting the company for their investments. If you see nowadays, all these asset management companies who are managing large funds are going towards talking a lot on ESG. So for capital, inviting capital for the company, the ESG adherence to ESG norms are becoming as Padmini said, it is inevitable. So the companies needs to look towards that and work towards that. And I have seen some of the the rating agencies are also coming up now, like MSCI, Sustainable Analytics, CDP, etc., are already started the rating processes based on the push or a nudge from various big investors who are looking at various companies for investments. So ESG is inevitable, and if a company wants to attract capital, so they have to look at this as a serious measure which they have to take care of. Coming on the larger point, as you said, circular economy. As a chemical company, if I can tell you a couple of instances which we practice in Tata Chemicals. See, one of our the large plant in Gujarat is an integrated plant where we have a large number of volume of solid waste which is coming up from a soda ash factory. If you have to dispose of that waste, it is going to be the big task. In an environmentally way. So what the companies have to think through, how do they bring a resolution to these kind of the things through technological developments. So Tata Chemicals uses these waste, this solid waste, to convert them into a cement, and makes a product out of it and sells it. And then these are the way the companies have to think through to develop the circular economy. And one more point which I want to tell you is that, for example, in UK, if you see there's a huge carbon cost which are coming up because the companies and their plants are assessed, and the best running plants are benchmarked as free allowance, and any plants which are emitting more than the best benchmarked plants are to buy the carbon credits from the market and then surrender to the government as a neutralized factor. Now we have seen that carbon costs have never been a big issue in the past. Now it is becoming the line item in the P&Ls of some of the companies. So buying the carbon credits from the market and then and passing it on to the customer is not that easy because there are best players which are already sitting in the market and supplying. So companies have to slowly, come to the terms of replacing the old technology with the new technology, and come up with the world-class plan to bring down the carbon emission and carbon footprints. And as I told you, two examples. And again, the companies have to now start putting in policies or the pledge that the groundwater drawals will be zero, and even the zero waste discharge of effluents. So these are the things which are now looking like it's going to come. It is already there in the the developed countries, and I think more or less the world is going to adopt that and go towards low carbon print globe.
Thank you, Rajiv. Mukund, your thoughts, please.
Well, like all other industries, pharma industry also cannot, be away from ESG. And I think better practices going forward and focusing especially on the ESG and, improving their societal, footprint is, very, very important. I mean, look at it, everything, whether you can recycle anything, you can, how do you take care of your hazardous waste? How do you effectively use your raw material, and all of that will definitely be kind of very, very important. focus for all the companies, including pharma industries. Now, how the government lays down incentives, how they collaborate, we'll have to look at it from a holistic perspective. Like obviously, buying carbon credits and all of that right now may not happen as much as it happens in the other industries like aviation. I came from aviation, and I remember we were talking about carbon footprint 10 years back, 15 years back when we just started the airline Indigo. But so these things are now getting that traction where kind of every company wants to now focus on this, take internal efforts, sensitization of the employees, improving their workspaces like factories and all of that to ensure that gradually we are creating less and less environment impact. So I think obviously pharma industry also has to work towards it, and has to bring in. In fact, I would hope that the pharma industries coming together on this and trying to see if kind of a lot of biopharma companies across the world, big companies have set up a committee where they are having certain guidances on these lines. And I think in India also we should do that, something like that.
Thank you, Mukund. Let's narrow down the conversation a little bit on the elements of governance. And all of you are either sitting on boards or represent boards or talk about this as a part of your committee interactions. Let's start with Padmini first. What's your view on how governance has changed its face in the whole VUCA environment? I mean, things are dynamic, they are fast-paced, changing literally on a weekly basis, if not daily. How does one handle governance, and what is the perspective from a board level?
I think despite the VUCA world, the principle remains the same, right? It's a state of mind and approach, and that you stick to what is right rather than what is expedient. I think. But of course, I think the regulator in India is getting more and more belligerent, and therefore one small footfall can really bring in a lot of implications, and there are also too many regulatory changes happening all the time. We're not commenting whether they're for the good or the bad, but just to keep up with all of that keeps everyone busy. I'm sure Rajiv, especially, even right now, the number of notifications that have come from SEBI, even just for non-convertible debentures, it takes one bad example to bring in a flurry of legislation, which makes it a little bit burdensome sometimes.
Thank you, Padmini. Rajiv, any thoughts on governance and the perspective of the board?
As a governance professional, I always looked at, the board's role, the constitution of the board, and board's oversight on the company is, though, it has improved and it is becoming more and more, visible. So my thought is that board, even though today, there are regulations which have come in to put a proper board constitution with the appropriate diversity in terms of gender as well as the expertise, young and old. I think we as a country, as a corporate sector, I think moving in the right directions. For pharma and the chemical sector, I feel that, the committees, whatever the statutory committee, I think we should be a little bit more than what is statutorily required. Like, according to me, is an audit committee is a very important committee, which, as regulated currently, that independent directors are majority. And some of the companies are even asking all the independent directors to be on the audit committee, so that everyone is, because audit committee handles many issues, including audit, accounting, controls, risk. And risk management committee is also very important from the perspective of the risk measurement and the mitigation aspects. Pharma and chemical companies, I think one of the the committee which is not a statutory committee, that's Safety, Health, Environment and Sustainability Committee, should also be one of the very important committees which looks into all these aspects. Environmental and health is very, very important aspect of governance. So if a board nominated committee which looks into this is an additional impetus to governance. So I am also propagating because R&D and innovation is integral part of chemicals and pharma sector. Independent director who has a scientific background, if he leads a committee, which could be a scientific advisory committee, to see the innovations and R&D pipelines of these companies and report to the board, would serve a long way. I also have seen, many companies are adopting different type of model to see that board is involved and in the affairs of the company, regularly and in minute details. Some of the companies which in fact we also practice that all these committee chairs are regularly briefs the board on all those major issues they have dealt in these committees on a regular basis. A permanent, that's one permanent agenda which is always there in all the board meetings, are briefing of chairperson of each of the committees to the board on key issues which they have dealt with in each of the committees. And nominating some of the independent directors who are sitting on the board holding company, parent company, on their key subsidiaries is also one of the very, very important aspect and forward-looking governance now, according to me. So I think we should support such governance norms. And the companies which are having a very good whistleblower mechanism in terms of policy and implementation, and a good insider trading platforms to prevent any insider trading and misuse of UPSI. All these type of governance issues which are properly put in terms of the policy and implementation, I think this will go a long way to serve the companies. Particularly, I'm talking about pharma and chemical sector, because pharma generally basically touches each and every individual on a day-to-day basis. So the governance structure has to be absolutely of top-notch quality in these sectors.
Thank you, Rajiv. Mukund, your views on governance and the perspective of the board?
Can I just say ditto? Rajiv spoke everything I wanted to say about it.
Well, it's the boys' club over there.
Exactly. So, it's nobody's guess that, it is the most important thing nowadays. And we all are continuously trying to be as, what I won't say very innovative, but as broad as possible. He talked about that, you should have various committees and, kind of scientific committees looking at the R&D pieces, and then the environment as a separate thing and all of that. Like some of the companies have a formal structure at board level for these things. And some of the companies may not have a very formal structure at board level, but we have them smaller groups of key important individuals looking at these things and, briefing the managing director or the chairman about these things and all that. It's not about how formally you do it, but it's about how regularly you do it. And as much as possible, you sensitize people. The sensitization at every level, I believe it's a very, very important thing. And we are talking about governance, and we can't talk about governance without the compliance part of it. So, when this is how the Legatrix as a software came into our system, and we said, look, while we are compliant, we know that we are compliant. And I had a discussion with chairman, but he said, can we have something formal structure to know that we are compliant, we are having a good governance, this, that, and all that. And that is where, we brought in this regulatory compliance software where we are monitoring. And so obviously, kind of governance is the key word in the pharma industry, whether you look at the manufacturing piece, whether you look at the R&D piece, whether you look at it, the making the medicines available to people at large. So, what Rajiv said is that it is absolutely important. You should have all those, policies in place, whistleblower policies, insider trading policies, sensitizing people, creating a kind of a structure where people keep checking with certain key stakeholders before they venture into, or before they take any decision, or before they float any idea in the system and all of that. So these are the checks and balances, but there's no doubt about it that we should have more and more formal structure towards making sure that everybody is compliant, and governance is given the most important.
If I may, with the permission of the male members of this panel, I think also introduction of women in the boards has been a positive step in governance. And I think there are world studies that show that also. So
Absolutely.
You make a very valid point. Yes,
no, absolutely. No, so Jaideep, I think, I mean, it kind of reminds me, I think Mr. Iyengar, who's an ex-KPMG partner, and, just to quote him, I don't remember in exact words, but basically he said, if you're an independent director, you need to have guts to be the pain in the neck and to act in full integrity and, discharge your role. So for me, actually, it's such a, I mean, it's maybe I'm not such a pain in the neck, but I hope I am. But that's what actually has become my bit of a guiding light, if I may say. And I think, I guess more and more, and Mukund, Padmini, Rajiv, they also kind of talked about the kind of onus on the boards as well as, the directors there is. So I think there are three things that we need to be really kind of be cognizant of. One is committed in terms of time, because there is, given the governance, and of course in the pharma, I can also, as well as I'm part of one insurance board, I mean, the regulatory papers are something that, and you need to have that kind of a commitment. So I think you need to have that commitment as well as accountability at times, right? So I think that is something which, I've seen broadly now boards change over the at least 2 decades that I've been associated with, boards now. I do see a lot more change in dynamics. I'd see a lot more questioning, also independent directors being part of strategy and all. So I think it's a good space. It's a good space also to be in. But I just thought, needed to highlight that it's both ways. So I guess even from organization's perspective, right? So when we actually get into our board meetings from an organization perspective, also we kind of on tender hooks in terms of, what to expect, and, and I think it's good. So it's both ways, right? So it's accountability and expectation both ways.
Yes.
So I think that movement is very strong.
No, Monaz, thank you so much. And unfortunately, we are quickly running out of time. So I'd like to now invite your closing comments before we sign off. Clearly, we touched upon a lot of topics. Each one of them merits a detailed discussion on its own. But let's start with you, Rajiv. Closing comments, please.
As we all mentioned about the pharma and chemical industries opportunity, which are huge opportunities we have. I think we as a industry and as a country, I think we should capitalize on this with the innovative measures and the COVID imposed digitization, which helped most of the companies to innovate and make their operations efficient, and also bringing in like ESG impact by lowering the carbon footprints on the globe, by investing in latest technologies, and also going towards circular economy, and adopting the good governance norms and the compliance protocols. I think we will be a nation and an industry with a formidable size, and as our Prime Minister said, we will be close to achieving a 5 trillion economy. Maybe a year or here and there, what the target he has set in.
Rajiv, thank you. Mukund, closing comments, please.
Yeah, so I would lay a more emphasis on participation by everybody in the governance, compliance, and in that kind of a space where more and more people are being compliant by their nature. We have to, it should come automatically for me to make sure that I'm being a good citizen. And the moment you you behave like a good citizen, you also behave like a good corporate citizen. And that's what the companies look forward to their employees, where, you know, the governance by structure, whatever, whether it is policy level, you know, initiatives, or whether it is sensitization level initiatives, whether it is, you know, checks and balances that you put, but making sure that we look forward to, you know, making everybody a very, very compliant human being and an employee. And I think that will create a good structure for an overall corporate governance in all these organizations. And we may not then give so much of, you know, importance about talking about it, rather than it becomes so naturally for us to be like that. You know, all of it, we can have a scale of measurement of how governed you are. And, you know, you can, you know, as an independent agency like you can come up with a kind of a scale, because, you know, like just the way you have compliance champions, compliance scales for various companies based on the software that you have. How about how good governed company you are? There has to be, you know, all these trade bodies and all that can come up with these kind of measurement. Like you have good places to work from the HR perspective. Right. How about a good governed company to work? Why not have that kind of a concept where you say, look, join that company, that's a brilliantly governed company. You know, so I would rather say something, I would love to see something like that.
Right, Mukund, thank you. Let's partner on that one, and I'll pick your mind outside of this panel. Monaz, your closing comments, please.
Yeah, so I guess Mukund took off my story. No, but yes, I think governance is definitely, I guess it's an underlining, you know, requirement for all the organizations. But I was just thinking, maybe it's a space right now where, you know, we need to reimagine business, you know, and especially from a pharma perspective, how to discover, you know, new ways to improve and extend people's lives. At the same time, you know, being cognizant of the ESG, the governance. So it's you know, basically the guiding light for all of us in terms of how do we deliver that and how do we do it more innovatively. So I think that's some of my thoughts.
Thank you, Monaz. Padmini, your closing comments, please.
So I think pharma, they say, is set to grow 3 times over the next 5 years, and chemicals a little bit more than 2 times. And so there's a great opportunity ahead of us, and I think we need to seize it. And the government has to do its bit by putting in place an enabling eco-structure, right?
Right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us on the 8th edition of Compliance 1010 and sharing your views on this sector. It's been very exciting speaking with you, and I'm sure the audience loved making notes on all of this. But once again, thank you so much for joining us today, Padmini, Monaz, Rajiv, and Mukund. Have a great day ahead. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
I would like to thank our panelists and Mr. Kewalramani for such an engaging and insightful discussion. You may now join our panelists for a live Q&A session in the breakout room.